anything from client inception through to project completion, and all the activities held within that. MSc supplied me with the VERT system. I think the reason that they supply only the VERT is the job in itself as a computer programmer. To get the job, there's got to be a computer. It is only the attachment to make it adaptable for a visually handicapped. The VERT system's accessible to me because it gives instant sound recognition to anything that's keyed in. It provides me with a good area of correction for anything that I have typed onto the screen. Oh, I've made a mistake.
Recognition. E C O N. Video offers instant sound recognition. Stop.
Everything you see on screen has a sound equivalent.
C O G N I T I O N.
If I go over a program with a colleague, it's quite often a combination of both sound recognition from the VERT system and my colleague actually reading off the screen.
Down the next paragraph, put in the options for looking at the screen.
Right.
If we get an extra, bring in an extra level of the network at that point.
Continue.
Down to
Less than.
45th. We drop it at that point and then put another paragraph there. That'll
Less than.
give it.
The job that I'm doing at ACH Project Services would be impossible to do for myself without the accessibility of the screen which VERT provides.
Aids to employment are absolutely essential. We don't have any anti-discrimination legislation in this country. We don't have a proper quota scheme for disabled employment in this country. Well, the latest figures we have show that around about £210,000 is being given to disabled workers themselves to provide the kind of equipment that they might need, for example, special typewriters or braille aids. Now that amounts to 15p for each disabled worker who is actually in employment, let alone the vast majority who aren't in employment.
For physicist Dr. Mike Wheeler, MSc help comes in the form of grants to make his workplace at GAC accessible. Grants which are strictly cash limited to £6,000.
My particular part of the work uses electron beam lithography, which is an advanced method of producing the minute patterns which are required on the surface of a microchip. The electron beam microfabricator is a very sophisticated piece of equipment which is run by a computer. Most of the machine is accessible to me except for the very top of the column where one needs to make adjustments and or change the filament. And because it is something like 6 foot off the ground, I needed some method of getting up to that part of the machine in order to make these adjustments. I have a platform which was supplied in part by the MSc, which enables me to be lifted off the ground in my wheelchair up to a sufficient height to get to the top of the machine. I believe the platform was originally designed to raise people from, say, pavement level to a front door where a ramp couldn't be provided. But it also doubles for this purpose, which suits my needs very well. In general, the building is very good for wheelchairs. The ground floor is flat everywhere. There are several entrances with no steps at all. There is another level which is served by a goods lift, but there's one part of the building which one cannot get to easily in a wheelchair, and that is an area where there are conference rooms which are necessary for important meetings. Now, this level is accessible by a short flight of steps, which of course are not passable by wheelchair, but there is now a stair lift fitted on those steps which enables me to get to the meetings in these important conference rooms. The stair lift was supplied jointly by GEC and the MSC. There were no major problems and it all happened fairly quickly.
We asked the government if they'd like to talk about this report's findings, and they agreed, but not until later in the year, after the report has been before the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee.
In the meantime, do tell us about your experiences of the MSC. And if you'd like any information about aids to employment, capital grants, fares to work, or any of the other MSC schemes, send for our programme information sheet, which you can get by writing to Link, Central, Birmingham B1 2.
Hello and welcome to Southwest Link. Next Saturday, the 12th of September, the East Cornwall Multiple Sclerosis Society hold their gardening show at the Public Hall in Liskeard. The day begins at 10 a.m. and Horticultural Therapy will have a stand on show. Horticultural Therapy is already quite well known in the Southwest. They can advise anyone with a disability and help them get the best out of their gardening. Viewers in Somerset still have time to attend the horticultural classes at the AIM Centre in Wells. Contact Horticultural Therapy direct at Gould's Ground, Vallis Way, Frome.
There's Kestrel. And now, there's Kestrel Super Strength. You can tell by the bite that it's Kestrel.
Bravo! Dairy Crest Clover. Tastes like butter, spreads even when cold.
And now, a special message to blood donors who are moving house. Did you remember to give your new address to your local blood transfusion center? We can't afford to lose a single donor. And we can't afford to lose you!
When you park your car on the pavement, even for the shortest time, it can be a nuisance and a danger to pedestrians, especially to old or disabled people. Or the blind. Or pram pushers. So when you park your car, please leave the pavement for pedestrians.
There are peals of laughter and pearls of wisdom falling at 7:15 Sunday night on ITV when Michael Aspel returns with a new series of Child's Play.
The whole world might shake because of all those great big whoppers flying about.
At 7:45, Joan Collins stars in a story of glamour and revenge, Sins.
I want that Nazi.
she is on the verge of losing everything she has ever worked for.
They have one thing in common. They all hate me.
At 10, a love story.
I told you I met him on the train. Are you so lonely? You couldn't imagine how much.
Trevor Eve, Joanna McCallum, Fulton Mackay and Fabia Drake star in A Wreath of Roses. Just one of your Sunday night programs on ITV.
Well, over on Channel 4 now, it's fireworks night in Chip's Comic, and here on TSW in half an hour's time you can see our Sunday afternoon film, which stars Glenn Ford in a strange tale involving the disappearance of 2 aircraft in which UFOs could be involved. The disappearance of Flight 412 is our Sunday film in half an hour's time. Here on TSW, now we continue with the Human Factor and Black Madonna.
The mysterious Camargue, a strange flat country where the delta of the River Rhone reaches out into the Mediterranean Sea. For centuries it was an isolated place, known for its white horses, its sturdy bulls, its gypsies and its legends. Today, it depends largely on tourism, but once a year, the authentic Camargue takes precedence. At the small coastal town of Les Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer, the horses, the legends and the gypsies come into their own. Yes, the tourists come to watch, but the event, the emotion and the devotion are genuine. Every May, thousands of gypsies from all over Europe make their pilgrimage to this town on the south of France to honour their patron saint, the Black Sarah. Gypsies are a deeply religious people. Their faith is a blend of Christianity and their own traditional beliefs, superstitions perhaps, and taboos. For centuries they've been a rootless people wandering the world. Some even describe themselves as a cursed tribe. They arouse both hostility and envy in non-gypsies. We envy them the freedom of the road. But at the same time we label them thieves or dishonest people. And yet, there's an old saying attributed to a French Jesuit: in the night of time, all men were gypsies. An idea which many townsfolk would be reluctant to entertain. For although the arrival of the gypsies boosts takings in the shops and cafes, the visitors are tolerated more than welcomed. The image of the gypsy as the swarthy, untrustworthy vagabond still persists in the minds of non-gypsies. There is much about gypsy culture which appears both alien and threatening. So it was to help me understand what the pilgrimage to Les Saintes-Maries means to the gypsies, and what non-gypsies may learn from that meaning, that I met up with Nathan Lee and his wife Josie, British gypsies and regular visitors to the town for the 3 days of annual celebration.
People still coming, just, you know, a few hours before the ceremony, people are still pulling on.
And do the different gypsies from the different countries go to separate camps, or are they all mixed in together?
Basically, it's more like in the types, although on this camp alone, we have Italian Sinti, German Sinti, Spanish Gitano, English Romney Charles, Calder Ash, and the Manouche. Basically 2 types. Those from more the north of France, and those from the south which show a heavy Spanish influence. You'll notice they all have Spanish names, they're deeply into flamenco music. These are the descendants of Spanish Gitanos who actually left Spain because of the pogroms, as it were, and settled mainly in the south of France and especially around the Camargue.
The celebrations centre on the church, dedicated to the two St Marys, St Mary Jacobi, legendary sister of the Virgin Mary, and St Mary Salome, mother of the Apostles James and John. It's said they arrived in France near the spot where the town now stands, having sailed from Palestine to spread the gospel. The parish priest, Father Morel, explained the significance for the gypsies of this legend.
Les Saintes-Maries, c'est un lieu très important pour...
Les Saintes-Maries is a very important place for the gypsies and the whole travelling world, because tradition tells us that the saints have been offered refuge by the gypsy community which was there already. There's no historical foundation for this, but they recognised Sarah as head of the tribe which would have been there at that time, before the Roman era and before the Christian era. It was Sarah who would have welcomed the St Marys, Sarah who would have received the gospel, and who would have asked to be baptised, she and all her people.
The Black Sarah, Queen of the Gypsy tribe, is not an official saint of the Roman Catholic Church. And indeed, local non-gypsy legend tells a very different story, that she was an Egyptian slave girl who came with the two Marys. So if the legend itself is uncertain and obscure, why do the gypsies come to the town today? I asked Father Dumas, a priest and himself a gypsy.
Les gitans d'aujourd'hui qui viennent au pèlerinage d'ici aux Saintes-Maries de la Mer
Nowadays, the gypsies who come here on pilgrimages to Les Saintes-Maries de la Mer come especially to fulfill a vow which they've made to St Sarah. That's why they put various kinds of cloaks on her. And then, at the same time, they come to ask St Sarah to protect them, and also to get together as families with all the others who are here. The gypsy world comes into its own again.
We actually come for St Sarah, not St Mary's, although we respect the St Mary's. To touch the image or to kiss the image is great luck. So that is the importance mainly. We believe, although it's our only saint, so obviously we must respect it as that, but also it is considered the greatest luck that is possible to have by coming to St Sarah.
I met another British gypsy, Steve Blackman, a travelling entertainer. It was his first visit to Les Saintes-Maries. Obviously, while there, he was hoping to make some money from the tourists, but he too felt the influence of St Sarah and the importance of the celebration as a religious festival.
She was somebody that, the story goes, rescued two women who were escaping from persecution in Palestine. And because of her actions of rescuing them, she became a saint, which is fair enough, because she was a gypsy.
And how important is the ceremony to you? Will you go to the church? Will you see the relics coming down?
We've been to the church already. We've been to see her. I've been trying to get here for 20 years.
On arrival in Les Saintes-Maries, having found a site to park the trailer and having met up with family and friends, the travellers make their way to the church. Children are held up to kiss the carving of the two Marys, the image which on the second day will be taken from the church and carried shoulder high to the sea. For the devout gypsy, the most important statue, however, is to be found in the windowless crypt beneath the altar. Hundreds of burning candles make it stiflingly hot. Devotees queue to kiss the statue of Black St Sarah and to whisper their prayers and requests. Had Steve Blackman found something special in his visit?
Whenever I go into a church, it's a special moment due to the fact that I used to restore them. So I understand the concepts of what a church actually is. Rather than just somewhere where people congregated, it was built as, should we say, a powerhouse. All churches are built on certain places that have something possibly in the flux of the earth, water currents, all this sort of thing, which create a power. So thereby, when people go into a church, it does something to them spiritually.
There is much superstition, even paganism, to be found in the gypsy devotions to the saint. Many Protestants would argue she's more a talisman than an aid to Christian faith. The Roman Catholic Church adopts a position of pragmatic ambivalence. It doesn't discourage the faithful, but tries to correct any error in their approach by bringing the church to the people in the camps.
God in his great tenderness says, you travellers, you Gitan, Romani, Yanish, Sinti, Manouche, whoever, I choose you for my friend. I shall take you with me just as I shall take the non-gypsy. I make no distinction. You are all my children.
But the Catholic masses in the camps are not well attended. The church today competes not only with the Sarah cult, but also the evangelizing of the Pentecostals and the Jehovah's Witnesses. Gypsies in general don't go to church, but they do care about the sacrament of baptism. Many parents make a special point of having children baptized during the festival. The church takes this opportunity to stress its understanding of the sacrament. But is it the same as that of the gypsies? I put the question to Abbé André Barthélemy, official chaplain to the gypsies.
The gypsies have a religious soul and they love devotional things. They have a gut reaction to these and so have a certain taste for religion, even though they don't practice regularly. They really only go in for baptism. They recognize baptism as a sacrament, and that's all. But they have their private ceremonies, like going on a pilgrimage or their worship of the dead. Well, all this is more or less Catholic, more or less in line with the Catholic faith. But since the Church has paid very little attention to the gypsies throughout its history, it's logical that the gypsies have formed their own religious observances without caring to align themselves with the teaching of the Church.
In France, years ago, the gypsies were actually banned from attending any church, from going inside. When they became more liberal-minded, they said, well, it's all right to watch the Mass through the window, but you still mustn't come in.
They have some fragmentary knowledge of Christianity, but this is not sufficiently developed to amount to enlightened faith. And obviously, in a rather naive faith, superstitions and beliefs which are partly true become accepted. For example, there's a lot of superstition connected with the dead, a lot about the dead returning, which breeds fear. Religion for the gypsies has too much fear in it.
There are certain words amongst families, mainly the names of animals. Now, there are certain animals that I won't say the name in English. I can say it in Romanist, funny enough, and it seems all right. But to say it in English is always unlucky for me.
Words for the most innocuous domestic animals are considered by some gypsies to be unlucky.
I actually won't hold a newborn baby, although I've several children, more than enough, and a lot of grandchildren. It's, the time of birth is considered like muckety, unclean, or Mary-May in some of the dialects. The same reason that a woman in a monthly cycle cannot cook food, cannot wash dishes, and it was also considered unclean for a man to accept food. Whereas some families, a woman would wear gloves, and that was considered all right, as long as she didn't prepare meat dishes. They have great respect for the dead. Years ago, they used to burn the caravan or the wagon, as we had then, and destroy all the belongings, various jewellery, money. That was all burnt, and what wouldn't burn was sort of hacked about and bent up, and then slung into a deep river.
But here, particularly at the solemn lowering of the relics of the two St. Marys every 24th of May, it would appear the Church and the gypsies, the travelling descendants of the ancient exiles from India, are as one. But there still remains a feeling in gypsy minds that this is their festival which the Church has hijacked, while the Church sees the event as a religious one, over which they should have control and not the gypsies. But a compromise has been reached. The saints process on different days. On the first day, St. Sarah is taken in procession to the sea. This is truly the gypsies' event. Carrying the statue of St. Sarah is a privilege handed down from father to son, though occasionally a particular pilgrim who has made a special vow is allowed to share the work. No one now remembers if the statue is painted black or has been blackened by the candles in the crypt. But she's been known as Black Sarah so long, it no longer matters. Devotion to a Black Madonna is common in many Catholic countries. So is Sarah part of that tradition? Or is she a confused folk memory of an Indian goddess, Sarah of the sea? Nathan Lee told me, whatever the history, it's more blessed to hold weddings and baptism during the festival, and good luck to take part, particularly to be in the sea when the saint is carried offshore. This year, it was whispered, St. Sarah had been dressed by the priests in the colour of death, causing the saint's bearers to slip as she was carried into the water. The church, I suggested to Nathan, could accept that St. Sarah brought blessings, but would be dubious about her powers to bring good luck.
Well, the church has different beliefs to us, really, in that respect. But that is part of luck, a happy marriage or a blessed marriage, whichever way you like to put it. The same as a child who is baptised at the festival in the Church of St. Marie's. It's considered, you know, it's got a great store of luck and good health for the rest of its life. Well, with us, luck is more than sort of like the Anglo-Saxon word of luck. It is, to go back to what you were saying there, it's almost like a curse to be unlucky. I mean, it's bad health, anything. You know, luck concerns everything that is good for you, not just luck as, you know, non-gypsies would use the expression.
So where does the luck come from?
From God, I should imagine.
Presumably, though, Nathan, the church wouldn't just disapprove, perhaps, of your interpretation of luck, but it would also disapprove of some of the things the gypsies are doing, particularly some of the fortune-telling and things like that. And yet that all goes on here, doesn't it?
The best justification I ever heard for fortune-telling came from a gypsy who had read all through the Bible. I said, what are all the old-time prophets but fortune-tellers? I mean, I've actually seen priests have their fortunes told. I don't think that the church, especially here, would be against gypsies earning a living while they're here.
The evening of the day of St. Sarah is a time for family get-togethers, for striking deals, arranging marriages, and music. The next day is the day of the two Catholic St. Marys. Some gypsies are already leaving. Their festival is over. Today, the local people reassert their ownership of the town. How would the parish priest describe relations between his temporary and his permanent congregations?
Avant la dernière guerre, ils venaient moins nombreux.
Before the last war, there were fewer gypsies coming here, about 1,000. There were about 1,000 inhabitants, and relations were friendly. There was good cooperation. But now, given that access is easier, there are at least 1,000 caravans. And now, of course, relations are less amicable, and this can be seen in the slight distrust that exists, and suspicion.
The procession of the town's patron saints, the two St. Marys, begins much like that of St. Sarah. Again, it's led by the guardians of the Camargue, but the atmosphere is very different. The local church hierarchy is much in evidence. In the same way gypsies converge on the town to honour St. Sarah, clergy travel from all over the south of France to honour the legendary sister of the Virgin Mary and the mother of the two beloved apostles. As for the gypsies themselves, some have already cleared their campsites and left town, so the streets and beach are far less crowded. On the second day, there are no mishaps as the saints are taken into the water, but then the townsfolk would claim to be far less troubled by superstition than the gypsies. On the third day, the scene changes yet again for a day of secular entertainment. At the crack of dawn, the guardians of the Camargue round up the bulls on the delta and later run them through the streets to the stadium for their own, less bloody form of bullfighting. There's also folk dancing in the local stately style. The international gypsy gathering has turned into a small town fete. The gypsies remaining in the camps were making their own entertainment. Few had gone to the stadium to taunt the bulls, Camargue style. The two cultures, which had appeared so together for a single day, had diverged again. Mutual mistrust remained. The gypsies believing themselves persecuted, the non-gypsies, as Father Morel suggested, seeing the travellers as ne'er-do-wells who both enjoyed and justified stealing.
The whole world needs a scapegoat and an underdog. Everyone, it's the old syndrome of it goes down to the office boy and the office boy kicks the office cat. And the whole world has chosen the gypsy as their scapegoat. We suffered persecution under the Muslim empires, came into the Christian empires and suffered persecution. And when the gypsies first came to Europe, the guilds, which were basically the trade unions of their time, forbade gypsies to be goldsmiths, coppersmiths, all their traditional work. And obviously there was no social security in them days. So if you've got a family and you're not allowed to practice your job under pain of imprisonment and possibly death, you're going to steal.
But there are legends, aren't there?
Oh, there are several legends. I mean, there's the legend of the nail from the crucifixion, where a gypsy supposedly stole one of the nails to save the Christ. Couldn't steal all of them. And that is why you see the 2 feet together on a crucifix. And they said that he forever had to keep moving because they were after him for the nail. And there's the belief that because of saving the pain of that one nail, so the legend goes, that God gave a right to steal every 7 years.
Gypsies, presumably living very much the traditional way of life, do keep themselves separate, don't they? They live within society, but also keep themselves very separate from it.
We believe in integration. We don't believe in assimilation.
So how do you what's the difference between those two?
Well, assimilate, you then take on the culture of the host society. You can integrate, mix with people. I mean, let's face it, without the non-gypsies, we wouldn't make a living. Then again, a place like here, without the gypsies, they wouldn't make a living. That's integration, but they're not assimilated. I mean, if it was assimilation, if you take, like, St. Marie's, for example, all the gypsies would be living in this village and running the shops.
As it is, the gypsies have their own ways of making a living. Being both gypsy and priest, Father Dumas recognises that by their very separation from society, the culture, the family values and the spiritual awareness of the gypsies survive.
The younger generation are losing their faith, but the gypsies don't lose their faith as long as they keep travelling. When they become settled, well, then they tend to lose their centre, their family ties, and the moment they start to mix with non-gypsies who are increasingly disillusioned, at this point they lapse. By travelling, though, the gypsies and their families remain closely knit. Their faith is reinforced in such a way that their families hold together.
Do we, non-gypsies, fear the gypsies because we fear something inside ourselves? Does our yearning for security and stability hold us back from appreciating our spiritual potential? Is this what the Jesuit priest meant, who said that in the night of time, all men were gypsies.
In the early days of civilization, as it were, or the known world, I mean, people were just travelling about and scratching for a living. I mean, people didn't have any sort of specific trade, and they moved from area to area and were possibly more freer. All right, civilization's a marvellous thing, but the trappings of civilization can sort of weigh very heavily on people and sort of tie them down. I mean, someone who is basically free, because no one is free these days, although we say the gypsy is the last free man, but if you're sort of a free spirit, as it were, I believe that your beliefs in God, for example, are a lot deeper than someone who is actually tied down with all the physical trappings.
Hay un gitano, gitano, que se va por el mundo entero, cantando de su verano, con un sombrero a la mano, como alegre, Salamanca bendita, tres cositas bonitas, cante flamenco y tiene tu Salamanca bendita, tres cositas bonitas, cante flamenco y torero. Salamanca te quiero, Salamanca y yo te quiero. Ay, que te quiero, como te quiero, te quiero. Ay, que te quiero, ay, 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 mi Salamanca. Gracias.